Good morning, hello and welcome. My name is Bhuvan for StudyIQ IAS English. This is the Indian Express Explain class where we take a look at the most important articles that you ought to be taking a look at from the examination perspective. Right? Let's get started. The three articles that I have for you today. Number one comes from the Indian Express Explain page itself. It is to do with boycott, divest, sanctions. That's the full form of the BDS movement. Okay, so we'll go and seek to understand what is the BDS movement. And more importantly, continuing on that conversation, we will go ahead and further explore the apartheid accusation against Israel. Okay, because that is the basis on which the BDS, the boycott, divest, sanctions movement is based on. Right? Number two, we will go ahead and understand today Minister Rajnath Singh with his counterpart from Australia. Minister Jaishankar with his counterpart from Australia will be meeting. The 2+2 talks are underway. Okay. And then we'll again go ahead and a step further and understand the India-Australia trade scenario. Okay. More importantly, if you do not know the differences between, say, preferential trade agreement, free trade agreement, customs union, economic union, comprehensive economic partnership, yeah, all of those, say, key terms, the fundamentals. If you are unaware of that, stand by. We'll discuss that too. And number three, we'll go ahead and understand. Basically, just seek to understand the indicators that are being released by the World Bank, specifically one that was released recently, to which the Chief Economic Advisor to the Government of India has commented adversely about. Okay, so these are the three agenda of the day. Let me see. Ruchira, good morning. Thank you. Happy Chat Puja to you too. Thank you so much. Author, good morning. Coder, Yathendra, your neighbor, Khushbu. Guys, thank you for joining. Good morning. Right, let's get started then. So this is the Telegram ID. We can go ahead and access the PDF of this entire lecture that I will upload around noon or say around 1 p.m. Okay. So the BDS movement now. Agenda number one. Okay. Now let's understand. It's a Palestinian-led non-violent campaign against Israel, and then it is linked to a particular event recently that is not of much importance to us. But let's go ahead and understand exactly what is the BDS movement. So the entire aim of the campaign, and I want you to look at the key lines here, okay, is to garner support for the Palestinian people's rights. Now, how does it define themselves? What is the BDS movement all about? It says that it is an inclusive, anti-racist human rights movement that is opposed on the principles of discrimination, including anti-Semitism and Islamophobia. So they are again against discrimination is what they are saying. Okay, that they want to stand up for the rights of the Palestinian people. So far, so good. Okay. Now, after that is the basis on which their whole, movement stands. The movement urges non-violent pressure on Israel until it complies with international law. And then they have three demands. So the first is to end Israeli occupation. Second is to recognize the rights of, the fundamental rights of the Arab Palestinian citizens of Israel. So again, as a beginner, one common misconception that you might have is that Israel is 100% of Jew population. No. They do have Arabs there and they do have rights there. Okay. So if you understand the whole concept, this is what you're looking at. If this is the entire area of the conflict and say, let's consider this to be Israel. Okay. So Israel comprises both Jews and Arab Palestinians, whereas the West Bank, the Gaza, the all other places, yes, you are looking at, say, Arab Palestinians. There are no Jews there. Okay. Now, Israel as a state has different laws for different Palestinians, different Arabs. One could be within their territory and one could be, say, on the, say, West Bank or in Gaza, on one of those, say, sensitive places. Right? Now, this accusation, this whole, say, scenario has led to the accusation that Israel commits apartheid. And so you'll often find Amnesty International of late, okay, and not just again Amnesty International, you also find, say, Israeli NGOs also, Israeli human rights organizations also, in the past have gone ahead released reports that have said that Israel is guilty of apartheid. Israel is committing apartheid, okay. Now for you and I, the most obvious connotation of apartheid is to go back to, say, South Africa, the South Africa example. Yes, you had South Africa plus the period of the place of what we know today as Namibia, okay. Today we know as Namibia. That time it was a part of South Africa. Okay. So South Africa and Namibia were the places where you found the most recent reference of apartheid. Now, is that the correct definition of international law, under international law? Or is it just an example of apartheid? Is for you to consider before you go ahead and analyze the Israel's, say, the accusation against Israel that they are committing apartheid. Okay. Now, what does this entire movement do? So, firstly, three parts. The BDS campaign is about boycott. Okay. It's about divest and it's about sanctions. Okay. Which means what? Eventually, you are looking at individual action and collective action. True or not? That you are going to, as an individual, boycott, say, Israeli goods. Or as a corporation, as an organization, will probably look to de-risk or decouple from Israel. Right? So, it calls for both individual and collective action. Okay? This is the movement's central thrust, the central focus area. Okay? Now, what has Israeli government said about this entire movement? So, they say that it is linked to anti-Semitism. What is anti-Semitism? Essentially, the feeling that, well, Jews are outsiders, that you go ahead and vilify a particular community. Okay? So the Israeli state links this campaign again as a campaign against the Jews and not against, say, the Israel state. Okay? So, this is the position on the two sides. Okay? Now, has BDS affected Israel's economy? Because again, you're looking at both individual action and collective action. Both. Right? So, if, say, organizations, companies do not want to invest in Israel, yes, can you attribute it to BDS? What is the action? What is the consequence of that? So, in recent years, you find that, well, this entire campaign has been successful. Correct? They have gone ahead and a few brands, celebrities have refused to continue to work in Israel or work with Israeli firms. Yes, you're looking at ice cream brands, Pink Floyd. Yes, you must be aware of Pink Floyd. It's a popular band, right? One of the best songs ever has been written by Pink Floyd. Okay. So now what happens? Because of this, because of these boycotts, yes, you are finding that this is a product of a long-standing policy of Arab states to boycott Israel. Correct? A long time you have seen, okay, of late you see that, okay, Israel has gone ahead and engaged with several partner states in the Middle East. But prior to that, Israel was almost isolated. Yes. So many are attributing this to the BDS movement, the boycott, divest, sanctions movement that is completely, wholly focused in boycotting, not engaging with Israel on an economic, on a people-to-people, on a social basis. Got it? So this is the BDS movement. But more importantly, from the exam perspective, now you need to consider one thing. So the entire accusation or the entire fundamental basis of the BDS movement is that Israel commits apartheid. Okay. Now this is important for you to consider. Whether Israel commits apartheid, have an opinion on that. Okay. So let's look at both the sides now, both the facets of this discussion. Is Israel guilty of apartheid? Now it has been accused of considering the Palestinians as a demographic threat and imposing measures to control and decrease their presence in the OPT, that's the Occupied Palestinian Territories. Okay, this is the OPT. So like I told you, you have the Israeli state that has both Jews and Arab Palestinians. And then you have these other areas that are largely of just fully 100% of Arab Palestinians. And Israel has different set of laws for different sets of Arab Palestinians. Okay, and in that complexity, is Israel committing apartheid? Okay, so Israel is accused of planning to Judaize areas of Israel, which means reduce the number of Arab Palestinians and increase the number of Jews. Essentially, this is how you go ahead and Judaize an area, change the demography of that particular area. Okay. It is also accused of oppression without borders and treating Palestinians as lesser citizens. You have checkpoints, your right to movement is constrained, yes, your right to say speech, all of the fundamental rights that you and I know of. Yes, you find that probably in most cases, the occupied Palestinian territory, the Palestinians living there, they do not have fundamental access to most rights. Right? Now, is that a necessity or is that a product of, say, the years of conflict that has followed? That is again important for us to gauge. Correct? And recently you found that, well, a basic law was passed by the state of Israel, the Knesset. Yes, this is the Parliament of Israel, the Knesset. So they went ahead and passed a basic law, which is known as the Israel as the nation state of the Jewish people. So the name gives it away. Don't you think so? The name gives it away. that once again this accusation of trying to Judaize this area, yes, if at all Israel wanted to negate this, they shouldn't have come up with a title that was so obvious. But let's go ahead and understand what this law says. Enshrined in the law is the complete superiority of the Jewish people when it comes to areas of, say, housing, access to land, urban planning, correct? So they get first preference. They get to have priority. Now, all of these are presented as evidences that yes, Israel on some level is guilty of racial discrimination, of segregation, of oppression. But then the counter view for you is very important to consider. Okay, because again, my job is to play the devil's advocate and show you both sides of the facet, both sides of the argument, and then you go ahead and decide for yourself, right? So let's look at the counter arguments now. Okay, Bulbul, good morning, how are you? Welcome, welcome. Now, the counter arguments. Israel is claimed as a multiracial, multicolored society, and that Arab minority actively participate in the political process. Yes, you find that they have the right to vote. They have the same right to grow in the Israeli system as any other Jewish person, which is why you find that, say, judges, people in the police force, the defense force, doctors, you have Arab Palestinians that are serving there. So now, if Israel was guilty of apartheid, this system wouldn't have been possible. This wouldn't have been seen. But you're finding this, and Israel presents this as an evidence that it is not, say, committing apartheid. Okay. Next, you also find evidence is pointed to the fact that incitement to racism is a criminal offense, as is discrimination on the basis of race or religion. This is enshrined in the way the Israeli system functions. Okay. This basic protection is guaranteed to the Arab minority, right? Once again, if it was indeed an apartheid system, you wouldn't have expected this to be there, correct? Number 3, defenders of Israel also point out that there isn't a single Jewish community living anywhere under Palestinian control. Remember when I was showing you the difference, right? Say suppose if this is Israel, you find that Jewish and Arab Palestinians are here, whereas in the other areas you have Arab Palestinians. Now, the Israeli critics, the Israeli people point out, the Israeli government points out that why is it that you do not have Jews living here then? Especially, you have Jerusalem right there, which is what, a 10-minute distance, the holiest of places. So if they can exist in Israel, why is it that you don't find anyone on the other side, right? So is this a case of, say, the pot calling the kettle black? This is also presented as an evidence by Israel, correct? Palestinian law makes selling land to Jews a crime punishable by death. Now, if you go back to the genesis of how Israel came into existence, you find that, well, a lot of the land that time was bought by the Jews, bought from the Palestinians. And thus you had ownership that changed hands over a period of 30, 40, 50 years. Now that obviously needs to be legated because land is the central area of contention here. It's the most important part of this entire discussion. Who owns the land? Now that Palestine doesn't want to go ahead and play with anymore. They have said, no, you cannot go ahead and sell land to Jews anymore, right? And number 5, the relationship of Arabs in the West Bank and the Gaza Strip is governed primarily by the terms of the law of armed conflict, right? That they are under international convention governed by a different law, which means they will be required to be given different treatment. And this is how Israel defends itself against the accusation of apartheid. Okay. So this is the entire argument. More importantly, from the exam perspective, from the mains perspective, obviously you ought to have a very fair idea of where you stand in the conversation conversation of apartheid and Israel. Do you want to take a middle line or you want to take sides? I've presented you the evidence. You can go ahead and see for yourself. Okay, let's look at this question now very quickly, friends. Apartheid as a system of segregation existed in which of the states? South Africa, Namibia, Zimbabwe. Okay, you will let me know your answers in the comment box after the class. Right, before I go forward very quickly, your optionals are central, guys. Many of you have reached out to me on Instagram regarding your optionals, regarding your prelims and how you should be preparing your GS. One thing I always tell all of you is, make sure that you give adequate importance and focus on your optionals. Okay? Your mains is essentially decided by your optionals. And in that case, it is best advised that you have an upper hand, an extra edge by preparing early preparing more comprehensively. Yes, give yourself that extra edge of going through tests, of going through multiple mocks, understanding concepts in detail, answer writing. And that is the central mantra, the central focus of the optional course that is being provided by StudyIQ IAS. Yeah, the subjects that are being presented for you: PSIR, Sociology, Geography, Anthro, PABAD, History, Mathematics, Philosophy and Hindi Sahitya. And you find that, well, the dates are more or less today, tomorrow, day after. So go ahead, take a look at the course deliverables, take a look at, say, more importantly, the facets of the course, the faculty profile. Some of the best, most knowledgeable individuals are associated with this. Yes, and use the code BA Live ASAP. You have limited seats. You would want to get an extra edge beforehand, okay, as soon as possible. So use the code BA Live. I hope to see many of you associated with the optional course of StudyIQ. Right. So may I know what's the India stand in Israel war? Well, India has been abstaining. Yathendra, if you have been following the votes at the United Nations, you will find that India takes off late. It abstains. Historically, though, India has voted against Israel, which is why you will find that it is often commented in the domestic newspapers that India has been ungrateful to Israel for all the help that Israel may have provided in the conflicts that India has faced. Yes. But then again, right now, what you find is that India has decoupled itself. Yes. Earlier used to have, and Yathendra, just to inform you very quickly, it used to be almost a foregone conclusion that if an Indian Prime Minister is to visit Israel, yes, he or she will have to make a stopover in Palestine, right? That doesn't happen anymore. You had the Prime Minister who visited Palestine independently, did not visit Israel. And then you had the Prime Minister again visit Israel that time and not visit Palestine. So what India has done is said that we are not picking sides. We will choose issues on merit and on, say, interest of not just global good, but also India's interest. Yes, and that is being focused to be balanced by the Indian government. Okay, Yathendra. All right, let's go forward. The second topic that I have for you today. So you have the 2+2 talks that will be happening. Okay, very, very important, the 2+2 talks. You have Defence Minister Rajnath Singh, External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar, and their Australian counterparts. So the Australian Defence Minister and the Australian External Affairs Minister, they will be meeting and going ahead and discussing issues of bilateral importance and bilateral significance. Okay, so let's go ahead and understand. The ministers are expected to discuss the situation in West Asia, China's increasing belligerence, India's diplomatic row with Canada, and the Russia-Ukraine war. So where is the, say, if these are the areas of convergence, okay, very important paragraph, by the way, because this tells you where are India and Australia collaborating in, meeting in. But more importantly, not just this, okay, more importantly, you need to focus on, say, in terms of military. Yes, you are looking at, well, you have Operation Sabre, yes, Quad, all of these, we are going ahead and collaborating with Australia. Yes, India and Australia are now part of the IPEF also. But trade and commerce is most where India and Australia are converging. Okay, very, very important from the examination perspective that you get a grip of the scope of convergence between India and Australia. Okay, let's go ahead and understand. But more importantly, I want you to focus on a particular line here. Okay, that this is the second such meeting. The first meeting took place in 2021, the 2+2 meeting. Okay, this is the second such meeting, the 2+2 ministerial dialogue, as it is known as. Okay, now let's go ahead and understand the India-Australia Economic Cooperation and Trade Agreement, the ECTA. Okay, this was signed last year. This came into force on the 29th of December 2022. Right? Signed virtually. Minister Piyush Goyal was present. Now let's understand some basic facts here. India's imports from Australia amount to 17 billion US dollars. Exports 10.5 billion US dollars. Okay. Now, India's imports are primarily raw materials. What we are importing the most is coking coal, in fact. Okay. From Australia, this is what we are primarily importing. What we are sending out? Well, finished goods. Okay. Finished goods is what we are sending out. See, the highly concentrated imports are coal. Okay. Whereas our exports are broad-based and dominated by finished products. India also spends 4 billion on students of India who go ahead for education in Australia. So you see that right now, straight away you can understand that your imports are higher than your exports, which means you're running a trade deficit, right? So how do you go ahead and narrow this trade deficit? What you're looking at is making sure that you have less duty on lines of tariff, lesser tariff on different supply chains, on different lines. That way you try to integrate your market with Australia to the most possible. Okay, and which is why you find that the economic cooperation and trade agreement is very, very important. Let's look at the facets of this agreement now. What does it cover? One by one we will understand. Very simple, I'll make it for you. Okay, it is looking at trade in goods, trade in services, rules of origin, technical barriers to trade, the rest, custom procedures, institutional issues, movement of natural persons. These two are very key for us to understand. The trade of goods and the trade of services. How is that being managed? Okay, so let's go ahead and understand your trade of goods and services. Okay, so what are we looking at? So what happens is Indian goods on all tariff lines, okay, very key. Indian goods on all tariff lines, right? What happens to these? They will get access to Australian markets, okay? They get Australian market access and they get it at zero customs duty. You see how India is looking to go ahead and, well, leverage of this goodwill that exists between India and Australia. Zero customs duty for all tariff lines, right? Which means what? Number two, how does it benefit us? We are looking at, well, cheaper raw materials for one. If you have lesser customs, which means cheaper raw materials, and you have more integration of your pharma industry, because this is where India is doing good, yes? So integration of your pharma industry is benefiting because of the ECTA between India and Australia, correct? Okay, how does Australia get anything then? What happens to Australia? What are they looking out for? Okay, so you find that around Australian exports by value, they also get zero duty access to Indian market. Okay, so around 90% of Australian exports by value get zero duty access. You see? And number four, tell me what else could be the significance of this? This happens, this means all of this, further integration of Indian and Australian economy. This is what is happening. They are integrating towards each other, which means more and more jobs will be created, right? And the exports value from India will go up also, right? This is how India benefits out of the India-Australia ECTA. Now, in terms of trade in services, this is the trade in goods part. Okay, this is my goods issue. Now, what happens in trade in services? You will have more than, say, I think 1 lakh students, right? See, now in services, let's understand services. So, in services now, you have around 1 lakh Indian students in Australia. Okay. Now, all of them after the ECTA get post-study work visas. You see how it benefits people? Yes. You complete your degree, you are getting a work visa. You get placed, you start a life in Australia. Why? Because India and Australia signed the ECTA. Okay. And number two, Australia. Now, Australia also has to get some benefit out here, no? So, Australian services to get negative list. Now, if you do not know what positive list and negative list are, just hang back. I'll explain you the difference between preferential trade agreement, free trade agreement, the whole 9 yards. Just give me 5 minutes. Okay. So, Australian services will get negative list treatment. Australian services to get negative list treatment, which they will get after a period of 5 years. What does this mean now? Just give me a minute. I shall be explaining it to you. No issues. Do you have any questions so far? Do let me know. Okay. And you will find that this will eventually help us in ending double taxation. That companies will not be taxed twice. Why? Because, well, India and Australia have integrated economically much more in a deeper fashion. Why is that happening though? Is it not obvious? After coronavirus pandemic, you had India and Australia that were hit equally hard. Okay, Australia was one of the few countries that went to the United Nations and in fact on a global scale to seek accountability from China. You also had the public China and Australia spat, lot of disagreement. Yes, their diplomats going hammer and tongs at each other, right? So this has forced India and Australia to come closer. At the same time, you find that India walked out of the RCEP, the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership that was being led by ASEAN and that was supposed to be China dominant. Yes, why? Because India feared that China will go ahead and engage in dumping in India. Yes, and at a time when, say, you are looking at Make in India to gain thrust, you want Make in India to succeed, you want your own economic potential to be realized by creating value within your own territorial borders. Yes, it was not in the interests of India to be a part of this. So now India walks out of this, which means they need to go ahead and, well, you need to substitute that market, no? You were doing negotiations for so long, you were preparing for something. Eventually, if you walk out of that because your objectives were not met, so you need to have a plan B in place. The plan B was go ahead and engage an ECTA with Australia. Critical minerals and significance, absolutely correct, Yathendra. Good. You realize many areas of convergence coming together. Now, once you've understood that this is how the ECTA benefits people, okay, are there any precautions that have been taken? Because deeper integration means deeper risk, right? So let's go ahead and understand the benefits for India. Now, more importantly, India's milk industry is highly sought after. India is one of the, in fact, the highest consumer of milk in the world. And thus you find that global dairy companies are looking at India as a huge market. And India wants to protect that market. You know, you have regional milk companies, national significance milk companies in India that are already doing good work. Which is why you find that India has not provided access and kept out milk and other dairy products. India has also done this with the US of A. Yes, milk is one sector that India keeps very close to its chest. Okay, so this is also kept out. Okay, you're looking at wheat, sugar, iron ore, apple, walnuts. All of this is not a part of this. Okay, Australia hopes for gains for its products such as coal and wines. So obviously, coking coal is the major export. You're looking at Australian wines now that will be further integrated with the Indian market. Okay, quotas in agriculture, horticulture products. Okay. Now, Australia has offered zero duty access to 100% of its lines. Like I told you, all tariff lines. But India has gone ahead and offered only 70% of its lines. You see? So who benefits out of this? Whose trade deficit narrows down? Quite obvious. Okay. So I've given you these points. Have a look at this. But more importantly, the last point is very key for you. This will tell you the mindset of the India and Australia government for this particular agreement. Yes. The point is that we're looking to overcome losses that it would have incurred as a result of walking out of the RCEP. The China factor. Correct? So you also find that of late India United Kingdom Free Trade Agreement is also in the talks. You must be aware of that, right? Lot of progress is being reported in the newspapers. We'll keep a very close eye on that. Okay? Let me see. Any other questions that you have for me? I'll be more than happy to take them, guys. Okay, feel free to ask me questions right now. Right. Now, let's go ahead and understand a very key difference. Many of you have problems with this. So, let's go ahead and address the difference between a preferential trade agreement, a free trade agreement. Okay. Are there any terms that you can other think of? You're looking at, say, comprehensive economic cooperation agreement, the SECA, or the comprehensive economic partnership agreement. SEPA. Correct? You also have customs union, economic union, all different terms. These are definitely different levels of integration, guys. Understand it simply. Okay? The closer countries want to integrate, there is a level to that. Okay? And say the economic union is the highest level of integration that you can have. And you start, what's the level 1? The stage 1. The stage 1 is the preferential trade agreement. Okay, so let's go ahead and understand them one by one. So what is preferential trade agreement? Okay, this is preferential trade agreement. Okay, so we'll see it in, understand it in the simplest manner possible. Now, preferential trade agreement is nothing. You have two or more partners that agree to reduce tariffs on a number of tariff lines. Okay, so you go ahead and reduce tariffs okay, on a number of tariff lines. Okay, so you have a particular set that you are saying, okay, इस पे हम अब tariff कम करेंगे. Okay, now the list on which you go ahead and decide. So you have say X number of goods and services on which you have reduced tariff. Okay, so this becomes my positive list. You see, this is the biggest importance here. You have a positive list in a preferential trade agreement. Here, this is the list in which you have reduced duty essentially. Okay, best example to understand this for preferential trade agreement. Okay, so you have say the India Mercosur PTA, very, very important. Can you very quickly tell me which place am I referring to if I say Mercosur? The India Mercosur PTA, best example of a preferential trade agreement that has a positive list, a list on which you have gone ahead and reduced duties. That is it. Simple. Okay. Now what is a free trade agreement then? What is the difference? Okay. Free trade agreement. Okay. Let's go ahead and understand free trade agreement. Let me know if you know the where Mercosur is related to. Very quickly, let me know in the chat. Okay. Now, under free trade agreement, you have, well, the tariffs are eliminated between partner countries. Okay. And you have a tariff structure for non-member countries. Firstly, different tariff structures. Okay. For say partner countries and non-partner countries. Different. It will not be the same obviously. And in this case, as you have a positive list here, the biggest difference between a PTA and an FTA is that you have a negative list here. Okay. From the exam perspective, here is one thing that you need to know. That the free trade agreement has a negative list. Now, what does this mean? What does this mean? Tell me. Negative list tells me that those goods, think of it, those goods on which duty is not reduced. Duty is not reduced. This is it. This is why it is negative. Duty is not getting reduced, negative list. Duty is getting reduced, positive list. So the best example of this, to my recollection, is the India-Sri Lanka free trade agreement. So both countries maintain different tariff structures and both countries maintain a negative list in this case. Simple. Okay. Is there any other difference that you can think of? In terms of say importance, which is the bigger, more closer integration? If I ask you that, okay, which tells me that two countries are more closely integrated, preferential trade agreement or free trade agreement? Well, FTAs. Okay. So in terms of level of integration, you find that free trade agreement is higher than preferential trade agreement for sure. Absolutely. Correct. South American Common Market, Mercosur, Ruchira, very nice. Good. Now, what is SECA and SEPA then? Let's go ahead, understand the rest. So, you have SECA, SEPA, you must have heard of this. Newspaper, you must have read of this. So, what does it mean exactly? Comprehensive Economic Partnership Agreement or Comprehensive Economic Cooperation Agreement. What does this mean? It means that this is essentially like a package. Think of it as a package. An economic package that has terms of reference for goods, for services, for investments. This is like a package deal that you get. Think of it, a combo offer. Okay. This covers all three. The goods, services, investments. You're also looking at IPR. All of this, there will be terms of reference regarding that. Okay. So the best example for this is say the India-South Korea. Okay. The India-South Korea agreement is the best example for this. India-South Korea SEPA. Right. So see again, this is how it is wider in terms of say SECA or SEPA. Much more wider no, in coverage than say your free trade agreement. Correct. In a free trade agreement, you have a negative list. That is it. Here you have deeper level of integration in goods and services and investment, in IPR, in competition, all of those. Okay. And finally, you are looking at say the other ones. So you have customs union, monetary union, economic union. What does customs union do, guys? Can you tell me an example of a customs union very quickly? What happens in customs union? So partner countries decide that they will trade at zero duty amongst themselves, but they maintain common tariffs against the rest of the world. That is it. So customs union means you have a group of nations, okay? So they will have zero duty among themselves. Duty will be zero here. But these nations with other countries, say non-custom union countries, X, Y, Z, they will maintain a tariff structure. This is a customs union for you. Okay. And then say economic union, the highest level of integration that you can have. What does economic union do, guys? Tell me now, is this not very easy? Quite easy to understand, no? So here you have common fiscal and monetary policies. You see? Now you have gone ahead and like your fundamental basis of economics is the same. So common fiscal or monetary policies will be present. So you will all sink together or swim together. Okay? You will have shared executive, judicial, legislature. Your executive or judicial or legislature may also be divested. It could be together also. No problems. Okay. Best example obviously you know is the European Union. Right. So these are the levels of integration that you are looking at, guys. Okay. And India, Australia right now is at the FTA level. Okay. India, UK looking at FTA level. We have again SEPA and SECA also. Okay. SAFTA is there, the South Asian Free Trade Agreement. Right. So these are what? Levels of integration that are above say MFN or priority or preferential trade list. Simple. Common currency. Common market. Okay, let's do that also. Very nice. Coder, good spot. Bataiye then. What is my common market? One student here has very rightly mentioned. A very regular student, I must add. Coder has been there since day one, I believe. Thanks, Coder. Batao, what is a common market? So this is essentially a customs union. Okay. Understand it is in the maths formula. So all the characteristics of a customs union that I just told you about. Okay. And then you have free movement of labor. Okay. Free movement of labor will be present. Right. And then you will have free movement of capital also. This is it. This is a common market. Which is the best example for a common market? Can you tell me very quickly in the chat? Bataiye. One example, the European common market. This is it. Remember that Schengen visa that allows you to go ahead and traverse freely within Europe? How is that coming into effect? It's coming into effect as a result of the common market system, that you're allowing labor to flow through easily. No borders stop them back. Okay, right. So I have given you a deep dive into India-Australia trade and more importantly basics of FTA, PTA, because again many students get mistaken this. ठीक है, चलो इसका आंसर बताओ मुझे जल्दी से. Preferential trade agreement, positive list. Free trade agreement, negative list. Economic union, neutral list. Identify the correctly matched for me. Let me know your answers in the comment box, my friends. Okay. And if you understood the differences between PTA, FTA, SECA, SEPA, common market, customs union, European Union, monetary union, right? Go ahead and consider to leave me a like. Yes. And if you want to go ahead and further, I will go ahead and upload a PDF. Okay. What I'll do is, I'll upload a PDF on my Telegram channel. Okay. If someone can just remind me this afternoon, I'll upload it. This will give you a basic difference between all of those key terms. So you don't need to write anything down. Okay. Just look at that PDF, have a fair idea, introduce those concepts in your answers. Okay. Right. Let me know your answers in the comment box too, my friends. Meanwhile, before I go forward very quickly in 60 seconds or less, the GS Live Foundation batch is beginning. Okay. I'm associated with the English and the English batches. Okay. Tomorrow, on 24th, the English batch begins. Morning batch. For the English, you have the evening batch. Right. Many students who already I have gone ahead and associated with in terms of geography, in terms of CSAT. Yes. And I'm hopeful that we'll get to go ahead and learn environment together too. Yes. And in that context, the preparation for your civil services is taken care of. Conceptual clarity is the focus. question solving ability is the focus. Nothing else matters insofar as clearing at least your prelims is concerned. More importantly, for your mains, you need to have adequate focus over answer writing too. Your optionals should be top notch. And then you look at the interview, where you are asked questions that you often don't think about. For example, here is a question I'll put for you. You can think for yourself and let me know the answer to this too, in case you have an idea about it. Say in the states that are generally hot, okay, why is it that people eat spicy food? Okay, what's your opinion? Let me know your answers in the comment box. Let me see. This is a very common question that was asked earlier this year, I think, in the interviews. That why is it that people in the warm states eat spicy food? Okay. Meanwhile, sign up for this program. Use the code BALIVE. You get allotted to my batch, and you'll see how we go ahead understanding geography and the other subjects. My esteemed colleagues take a look at the other subjects for you. And the entire focus is to give you the maximum benefit in the most cost-effective manner. Okay? So the last and the final topic for this morning. World Bank Global Indicators. Essentially, you find that, well, worldwide governance indicators have been released by the World Bank. So again, one of the added to the list that you mug up before the examinations. So the World Bank, besides this, goes ahead and publishes the Ease of Doing Business Index. Right? And you have, say, other other indexes that are coming up. Now you have the Press Freedom Index that is published by the Reporters Sans Borders. You have the Intellectual Property Index that is published by the World Intellectual Property Forum organization, WIPO. So this is another index that you need to be aware of. Okay. Now India is not happy with this index. Okay. India has a percentile rank of 63.2 in governance effectiveness, meaning it was equal to or better than 63.2% of the countries, but below 37% of the countries. So India is getting 63% marks essentially. Okay. Now India is not happy with this. India has taken substantial reforms insofar as not just institutional reforms, policy reforms, on-ground reforms, all have been done to make sure that our ecosystem for investment is created and sustaining and thriving. Okay. So thus you find that the Chief Economic Advisor to the Government of India, Nageshwaran, CEAV Nageshwaran, has gone ahead and rubbished the report. Now let's look at the indicators. What are the indicators? Voice and accountability, political stability, regulatory quality, okay, governance effectiveness. This is where India has been given 63% marks. Rule of law and control of corruption. Now, all of these are fair indicators, guys. But the problem is in terms of, well, the upstream and the downstream. Okay, let's understand India's position very quickly. So India says that, well, firstly tell us, how are you going ahead and sampling, collecting your data sets? How are you getting your data sets first? Which way are you going ahead and conducting your survey? And India also says, how do you go ahead and analyze those data sets? Because eventually what you find is, based on these data sets and the interpretation of them, you have the world credit rating agencies that go ahead and give credit rating to countries. Particularly developing countries find this to be of extreme importance for them. Because this is taken as a measure of how legit you are. You know, in your terms, how legit a country is. So India says that, okay, this relationship is now getting formed. You have the World Bank that goes ahead and releases this index. And now this is used by the credit rating agencies, right? They go ahead and rate a particular country, and this directly affects the economy of the country. Which is why India is going ahead and questioning World Bank as to how are you preparing this index in the first place. The points of objection being, how are you sampling your survey? What's the sample size? What's the data set? How was sampling done? And eventually, how are you analyzing the results of that survey? The interpretation also is being questioned by India. Okay. So this is another key concept that you need to be aware of. Okay. Let's look at this question. Ease of doing business, worldwide governance indicator, and global innovation index. Which of the above are released by World Bank? Well, a relatively easy question, the last one for you. Okay. Right. If you have any particular questions related to this discussion, you reach out to me on my Instagram handle and I shall be more than happy to address it for you. Okay, let's look at the questions of last class. So which of the above make lithium-ion batteries preferred for electric cars? High energy density, absolutely correct. Wide temperature operationality, yes. Life cycle should be large. Discharge rate should be low. All of the above being the answer here. Now, if these are new terms for you, you have no idea about them, go ahead and look at the class of Friday. That was what? 20th, 19th, 18th, 17th. Okay. Go ahead and look at the class of 17th November. We have expressed and explained in detail the category what makes lithium important for batteries. Okay. Now, what is true for Kabul? Joint venture company, correct. It has the participation of only center, not center and states. And it helps in the realizing import substitution. You find that only 2 are true. So, B being the answer here. BSR, the Business Responsibility and Sustainability Report, based on this, absolutely correct. Now, this many of you got incorrect. Okay. This is essentially based on the United Nations Guiding Principles on Business and Ethics and Responsibilities. Okay, which is an affirmation of India's commitment to Agenda 2030. Okay, but the primary document on which this entire business sustainability and business report and sustainability report is based on is UNGP BNR. Okay, and SEBI is the implementing agency. The incorrect statement here being B only. Right? Monica, Rupash, Pooja, S. Sharma, Gupesh, Mandeep, Neerja, Harshit, Manika, Crystal, Ruchira, Shubham, Akhil, Coder, Anis. I have taken your consideration. I think most likely the Aranya series, it will be beginning next Monday. Okay, we'll be back every day and we'll finish the entire environment syllabus. Okay, so this begins on Monday. Today is what? The 20th. So 27th is when we begin with the Aranya series again. Okay. Studying Raccoon, Ayush, Aditya, Gatso, Rahul, well done. Bahut badhiya. Most of you only got that last question incorrect, which is fine. It was a little tricky question. Okay. Other than that, all of you have got the questions correct. To the questions of today also, go ahead and answer them. The entire focus should be on question solving. Right. Thanks again, guys. Please do consider leaving me a like. It will greatly encourage me. And I'll see you tomorrow morning at 7 a.m. for the next class of Indian Express Explained. Till then, take care. Have a productive day. And I'll see you tomorrow at 7 a.m.